Podbean, your message amplified.
Ready to share your message with the world? Start your podcast journey with Podbean.
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 Podbean. Podbean, the AI-powered all-in-one podcast platform.
Thousands of businesses and enterprises trust Podbean to launch their podcasts.
Launch your podcast on Podbean today.
My school uses Podbean.
My church, too.
I love it. I really do.
Go.
You are now listening to Mark's Unexplained World by Mark the Medium. Available on Apple Podcast, YouTube, Spotify, Amazon Prime, Podbean, and most other podcast platforms. Tonight's episode is about sleepwalking. So it's over to you now, Mark, for this week's yawning but thrilling adventure.
Sleepwalking, which is also known as somnambulism or noctambulism, is a phenomenon combined of both sleep and wakefulness, with it being classified as a sleep disorder belonging to the parasomnia family. It occurs during what is known as a slow wave stage of sleep whilst in a state of low consciousness, along with a performance of activities that are usually performed during a state of full consciousness. And although sleepwalking cases can generally consist of simple or repeated behaviours, there have been occasional reports of people performing very complex tasks while still in this sleeping state, with the sleepwalkers themselves often having either little or no memory of the incident, as their consciousness has altered into a state in which memories are difficult to recall. The sleepwalkers' episodes usually last anything from 30 seconds to 30 minutes, and although their eyes are open, their expression is dim, distanced, and glazed over. During the amnesic state that sleepwalkers are in, many things can happen without their recollection, which include things like sexomnia, where an individual can engage in sexual behaviours with either oneself or others, and sleep eating, which is otherwise known as a sleep-related eating disorder in which sleepwalkers eat involuntarily. Most sleepwalkers get injuries at some point during their episode, often with just minor injuries, such as cuts and bruises. However, on rare occasions, some sleepwalkers have fractured bones or even died as a result of a fall. And some sleepwalkers may also face the embarrassment of being found naked in public. Greetings, Unexplainers. Thank you for tuning in once again and listening to this wake-up episode of Mark's Unexplained World. My name is Mark Hughes. I'm a medium, a ufologist, a true crime buff, and a man with a very dark and disturbed sense of humour who realises that he is just friends with 25 letters of the alphabet because I don't know why. But just to give you a better idea of who I am and what I do, every week, usually on a Tuesday night, though occasionally on a Wednesday, allowing for bank holidays and busy weekends, I do a podcast on the many wide and various subjects that fall under the Unexplained banner. These include ufology, hauntings, disasters, and all sorts of other paranormal phenomena, including true crime, unsolved crime, serial killers, the darker side of some past celebrities, and the occasional missing person that often goes unnoticed. So if you are listening to this show on YouTube, please give us a review or an opinion of the episode subject that I can reply to, a thumbs up, subscribe to my channel, and hit that notification bell. Or, if you are listening on any of the other podcast platforms, again, give us a like and a follow. And if you get a few minutes, perhaps you might like to check out my social media groups and pages, including Facebook, Instagram and TikTok, which are filled daily with all things unexplained and crime. I will also put links to some of my socials in the description. In this episode, I'm going to tell you about the night walking stories surrounding sleepwalking. And this week's necessary disclaimer. I feel I must point out here, listeners, that I am not a doctor, a psychiatrist, or any other sort of sleep specialist. All the information I have used in this show is from various NHS, Wikipedia, and well-being sites. So if you do have any sleep issues, please do not use this podcast as a way to help you get better. If you need help, go see a GP or specialist, as this show is for entertainment purposes only. I do touch on the subject of people sadly dying through misadventure, including various other mental health issues, mainly regarding sleep or lack of, so it may prove upsetting to some. Remember, you listen at your own discretion. Also, all opinions and comments are strictly my own, but the facts of the case remain. I also apologise if I pronounce anything incorrectly. Although my English is my first and only language, I will always give 100% to anything, unless I am donating blood, of course. Anyway, let us get back to the story. Sleepwalking has attracted a sense of mystery over the years, but was not seriously investigated and diagnosed until the 19th century, with the German chemist and parapsychologist Baron Karl Ludwig von Reichenbach making extensive studies of the subject. And then using his discoveries to formulate his theory of the odic force, which was a hypothetical vital energy or life force that was believed by some people in the mid-19th century. Sleepwalking was initially thought, back in the 1950s, to simply be a dreamer who was just acting out their dreams. For example, in one study from 1954, published by the Society for Science and the Public, concluded that the, and I quote,
repression of hostile feelings against the father caused the patients to react by acting out in a dream world with sleepwalking the distorted fantasies that they had about all authoritarian figures, such as fathers, officers and stern superiors.
And then, some 12 months later, this same group then published another article with a new conclusion, saying that, and again I quote,
sleepwalking, contrary to most beliefs, apparently has little to do with dreaming. In fact, it occurs when the sleeper is enjoying his most oblivious, deepest sleep, a stage in which dreams are not usually reported.
However, a more recent research into the subject has discovered that sleepwalking is actually a disorder of NREM, which is otherwise known as a non-rapid eye movement arousal, and that acting out a dream is the basis for an REM, or a rapid eye movement sleep disorder, which is otherwise known as a REM behaviour disorder, or a REM sleep behaviour disorder. You with me so far?
I think so, yes.
Good, because there's more. Over time, more accurate data regarding sleep and its mysteries became available due to new inventions in technology, such as the electroencephalogram. Is that right? Or the EEG for short. I'll just stick with EEG. By the German neurologist Hans Berger in 1924. And BEAM, which is otherwise known as a neuroimaging scanner by the neurology specialist, a Dr. Frank Duffy, in the early 1980s. In 1907, Sigmund Freud spoke about sleepwalking to the Vienna Psychoanalytic Society, believing that sleepwalking was connected to fulfilling sexual wishes. But at the same time, he also said that he was surprised any person could move without interrupting their own dream. Sigmund Freud also suggested at the time that the very essence of this sleepwalking phenomena was the desire to go to sleep in the same area as the individual had slept in childhood. And then, 10 years later in 1917, he speculated about sleepwalking in an article called A Metaphysiological Supplement to the Theory of Dreams, with his essay clarifying and expanding his hypothetical ideas regarding this phenomena, describing the dream as a fragile equilibrium that is destabilised by the repressed unconscious impulses of the unconscious system that does not obey the wishes of the ego. And also the unconscious impulses and day residues coming together, resulting in a conflict. With Sigmund Freud also stating that this unconscious impulse could be expressed as mobility during sleep, and this would then be what is observed as sleepwalking, though what actually makes it possible remains unknown. On some quick figures before we go into the break. The lifetime prevalence of sleepwalking is estimated to be 4.6 to 10.3% of the population, and a meta-analysis of 51 studies that included more than 100,000 children and adults found that sleepwalking is more common in children, with an estimated 5%, compared with 1.5% of adult sleepwalking at least once in the previous 12 months. However, the rate of sleepwalking has not been found to vary across ages during childhood. And according to Google, somnambulism, or sleepwalking, simply because it's easier to say, as at the time of researching for this show, it is claimed that it does not exist in non-human primates, which includes apes, chimpanzees, gorillas, orangutans and gibbons, and so thus it is a unique behavioural disorder present only in humans. However, having said that, it is unclear if it is simply a case of it not being observed yet. After this first short break, in part 2 we will look at what possible causes there are for sleepwalking and other associated disorders.
Dare to discover the unknown? Book your own paranormal investigations at HAPRA 2026. The Haunted Antiques and Paranormal Research Centre, HAPRA, are now taking 2026 bookings, and your next supernatural adventure is just a £50 deposit away. New for 2026, we have upgraded. Our location now features improved sound insulation on all our windows, making it easier than ever to hear what should not be there. Bring your team. Bring your equipment. Explore the unexplained. Record the impossible. Limited slots available. Secure yours now. Book now. Believe later. HauntedResearchCentre.com.
The actual cause of sleepwalking is relatively unknown. However, a number of as yet unproven hypotheses are suggested as to why it might occur. These include things like a delay in the maturity of the central nervous system, sleep deprivation, fever, excessive tiredness, or an increased slow-wave sleep, which is the most restorative stage of sleep, along with being the most important for when you wake up feeling refreshed. Another component to sleepwalking that scientists have pondered over is thought to be a genetic component, with one study finding that sleepwalking occurred in 45% of children who have one parent who sleepwalked and 60% of children who have both. Meanwhile, meaning that it is possible that it is the heritable factors that are causing an individual to sleepwalk, but with the expression of the individual's behaviour during an episode being influenced by their own environmental factors. Other hypotheses of sleepwalking have been linked to the neurotransmitter serotonin, which regulates mood, sleep, appetite, along with other cognitive functions, which also appears to be metabolized differently in both migraine patients and people with Tourette's syndrome, with persons who have either of these conditions being 4 to 9 times more likely to experience an episode of sleepwalking. Another theory that contributes to sleepwalking episodes in women has been put down to hormonal fluctuations, with the likeness being higher before the onset of menstruation. And, according to some reports, it also appears that hormonal changes during pregnancy can also decrease the likelihood of engaging in the act of sleepwalking. Parkinson's disease is also thought to trigger the condition without any previous history of the sleepwalking disorder. Most studies that have analysed the patients of sleepwalking mainly look at the sleep disorders in adults. However, children can also be affected, and in the 10% of the population that experience sleep-related disorders, children are most affected, mainly due to their developing brains. A study that was conducted in Australia looked at sleepwalking and its association with the sleep behaviours in children, and it originally thought that sleepwalking could be associated with children's bedtime routines, with those children who have behavioural problems being more than likely to develop a sleep disorder, which is a separate thing altogether. However, they eventually found that the relationship between sleepwalking and their behavioural problems was actually more associated with sleepwalking than what they originally thought. And this may very well be because studies showed that sleep-related disorders and sleepwalking happen simultaneously, and they realised that one cannot exist without the other. Sleepwalking, especially when it involves children, has also been known to accompany the related phenomenon of night terrors. On an interesting side note here, night terrors, which are also known as sleep terrors, are a sleep disorder causing feelings of panic or dread, typically occurring during the first hours of sleep and can last for anything up to 10 minutes. However, it can last longer, especially in children. Night terrors usually begin in childhood and usually decrease as age increases, with the main factors that may lead to sleep terrors being young age, sleep deprivation, medications, stress, fever, and intrinsic sleep disorders, which are caused by an internal dysfunction. And while nightmares, meaning bad dreams that cause feelings of horror or fear, are relatively common during childhood, night terrors occur less frequently. Amid a night terror, the affected person may wander in a distressed state while still asleep, and examples of sufferers attempting to run or aggressively defend themselves during these incidents have been reported in medical literature. In some reports, when it comes to adults sleepwalking may be a symptom of a psychological disorder, and others say that, and I quote,
"A higher incidence of sleepwalking events has been reported in patients with schizophrenia, hysteria, and anxiety neuroses."
But not only that, some accounts even say that patients with either migraine, headaches or Tourette's syndrome are 4 to 6 times more likely to suffer from sleepwalking. During the amnesic state that the sleepwalkers are in, many things can happen, with most of them happening without the patient's recollection. One of those things that can happen is a condition what is known as sexomnia. Sexomnia, which is also known as sleep sex, is a distinct form of parasomnia, or an abnormal activity that occurs while an individual is asleep. And it is mainly characterized by an individual engaging in sexual acts, either with oneself or others, with it often being diagnosed in males at the beginning of adolescence. And although the sleepwalker may appear to be fully awake, individuals who have sexomnia often have no recollection of the sexual behaviour they exhibit while asleep. So as a result, the individual that they have shared the bed with notices and reports the sexual behaviour. In some cases, a medical diagnosis of sexomnia has been used as a criminal defence in court for some alleged sexual assault and rape cases. And even though it is a rare occurrence, it can happen during a sleepwalking episode. And another sleepwalking ailment is a condition known as sleep-related eating disorders, in which sleepwalkers actually eat involuntarily. A nocturnal sleep-related eating disorder, or an NREM for short, is a combination of a parasomnia, which again is the abnormal activity that occurs while an individual is asleep, and an eating disorder. It is described as being in a very specific category within a state of sleepwalking that includes behaviours connected to a person's conscious wishes or wants. And it has been reported many times that the nocturnal sleep-related eating disorder patient is a person who is fulfilling the needs of what their conscious mind wants that they themselves are suppressing. However, this disorder is difficult to distinguish from other similar types of ailments. The event itself can include either eating and or drinking regular cuisine, or even an odd combination of various other foods. These sleep-eating disorders are often induced for either stress-related reasons or by sleep medications such as Ambien, which is a brand name for Zolpidem, a medication primarily used for the short-term treatment of sleeping problems. Although I feel I should point out here that there are many other brands of sleeping aid medication, but Ambien is the most popular. Because many sleep eaters prepare the food they consume, there are of course risks that involve burns from either the oven and or other appliances. And, as probably expected, weight gain is also a common outcome of this disorder, mainly because the food that is frequently consumed whilst in the sleepwalking state often contains high carbohydrate levels. Sleepwalking is also known to cause insomnia, which is a sleep disorder that causes difficulty in falling asleep or staying asleep for as long as the body desires, and is typically followed by daytime sleepiness, low energy, irritability, and a depressed mood, which may result in an increased risk of accidents as well as problems focusing and learning. Insomnia can either be short-term, lasting for days or weeks, or long-term, lasting for more than a month. Most sleepwalkers get injuries at some point during their sleepwalking episode, often getting minor afflictions such as cuts or bruises. However, on some rare occasions, sleepwalkers have even fractured bones and been killed as a result of a fall. And some sleepwalkers have also faced the embarrassment of being found naked in a public place. After this second short break, in part 3, we will look at how sleepwalking is diagnosed, some ways of how it is treated, and preparing for your sleepwalking trip.
Fright Nights was established in 1999 as the first company in the world to offer overnight ghost hunt experiences to the general public, pioneering paranormal events since the last century. Fright Nights operate at hundreds of the UK's most haunted and exclusive venues. All events have their own team of experienced paranormal investigators, mediums and psychics. They have a VIP members club for regular returning guests, offering loyalty discounts and exclusive invitation-only events. They can also host private events for your family and friends. You can contact them on 07 852 998 628 or email them at office@frightnights.co.uk, or take a look at their website at www.frightnights.co.uk, where you can see the many locations they investigate and learn about them and the opportunities they have available. Hundreds of ghost hunters join Fright Nights every month for the most thrilling ghost hunting experiences they'll never forget. If you haven't been on a ghost hunt before, then why not join them to see what it's all about? Why not visit their social media sites for up-to-date information on all the places they visit and to see what's coming up in the future? They look forward to seeing you all soon. Fright Nights Ghost Hunting Events. Remember, only the original will do.
Polysomnography, which is a multi-parameter type of sleep study, is the only accurate assessment of a sleepwalking episode. However, because this is a costly method and because sleepwalking episodes are usually infrequent, other measures are commonly used instead, which include self, parent or partner reports. There are three common diagnostic systems that are generally used for sleepwalking disorders, which are
1.
The International Classification of Diseases, or ICD-10 for short.
2.
The International Classification of Sleep Disorders, or ICSD-3 for short.
And 3.
The Diagnostic and Statistical Manual, with the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual defining just two subcategories of sleepwalking, although, and just to confuse us, sleepwalking does not need to involve either of these aforementioned behaviours.
1.
Sleepwalking with sleep-related eating,
and 2.
Sleepwalking with sleep-related sexual behaviour, which is otherwise known as sexomnia. Some of the problems of doing an assessment of sleepwalking via the polysomnography is that sleepwalking is less likely to occur in the sleep laboratory, and if an episode does occur, it is usually less complex than what the patient experiences at home. Therefore, the diagnosis can often be made by the assessment of the patient's sleep history, time course, and the content of the sleep-related behaviours. So, sometimes home videos can provide additional information and should be considered in the diagnostic process. Sleepwalking should not be confused with an alcohol or drug-induced blackout, which can result in a similar amnesia effect. As in an alcohol-induced blackout or drug-related amnesia, a person still can actively engage and respond to their environment, meaning that they can have conversations or drive a vehicle. However, the brain does not create memories for these events. A systematic review found that approximately 50% of drinkers have experienced memory loss during a drinking episode and have had associated negative consequences like those of sleepwalkers, including injury and death. As of yet, well, at the time of researching for this show anyway, there have been no clinical trials to show that any psychological or pharmacological intervention is effective in preventing sleepwalking episodes. But despite this, there is a wide range of treatments that have been used with sleepwalkers, with some of these psychological interventions including psychoanalysis, hypnosis, scheduled or anticipatory waking, assertion training, relaxation training, managing aggressive feelings, sleep hygiene, classical conditioning including electric shock, and play therapy. On an interesting side note here, and because I've not done a side note for a little while, play therapy is a technique that uses play as a way of helping people understand and express their thoughts and feelings. It is mainly used with children who may not be able to put down how they are feeling into words, and helps them to communicate at their own level using everyday playthings, which in turn can help them learn to cope with what they're going through, to develop and to build a better relationship with others, along with the tools that they will need in order to help them develop relationships in the future and to help them believe in themselves. Despite urban legend, there is no evidence to show that waking up a sleepwalker is harmful or not, although if you do wake one up, they are most likely to be very disorientated, which, to be honest with you, that probably sounds about right. Well, I know I would be anyway. And also, according to reports, unlike other sleep disorders, sleepwalking is not associated with any daytime behavioural or emotional problems, which may be because the sleepwalker's sleep is not disturbed even when they are wandering around the home. Maintaining this safety of the sleepwalker and for other sleep problems is of course recommended, and not only that, but reassurance is also recommended even if the sleepwalker themselves is not causing any problems. However, if it causes distress or there is risk of harm either to oneself or others, hypnosis and scheduled waking are recommended as treatments. However, personally, I would still highly recommend that you speak to your local GP or go see a sleep specialist. For those of you who are suffering with sleepwalking, it can be a very hazardous journey, wandering around the home, possibly in the dark, with a glazed look. So you may want to look at things like a door alarm, which may offer you a measure of protection. The intention is that the door alarm sound will fully awaken the person and interrupt their sleepwalking episode, or alternatively, if the sleepwalker lives with others, the sound will prompt them to check in on that person. Another piece of advice from some of the well-being websites is that the sleepwalkers should aim to have their bedrooms on the ground floor of the home, apartment, dorm, hotel, or wherever they happen to be staying. Sleepwalkers should also Sleepwalkers should also not have easy access to any weapons. You know, things like loaded guns or knives in the bedroom, or indeed for that matter, any other room of the house, and if there are weapons, they should be locked away with the keys secluded from the sleepwalker. And one last piece of advice for partners of sleepwalkers who are violent or disturb your own sleep: slumbering in another room may seem a little lonely at times, but at least it will give you a better quality of sleep. As I mentioned in my introduction at the beginning of this episode, I am not a doctor, a psychiatrist, or any other sort of sleep specialist, as all the information that I have used in this show is from various NHS Wikipedia and wellbeing websites. So again, If you do have any sleep issues, please don't use this podcast as a way to help you get better. If you need help, go see a GP or a sleep specialist, as this show is strictly just for entertainment purposes only.
Thank you all for taking the time out to listen to this episode of Mark's Unexplained World. In our next episode, show number 160, we are going to be looking at the dark side of Lou Costello. Louis Francis Cristillo, better known as Lou Costello, was an American comedian, actor and producer who was best known for his double act with Bud Abbott. In 1943, while rehearsing at their NBC studio, Costello received word that his infant son, Lou Jr., had accidentally drowned in the family pool. And later during his career, in 1945, due to the strange relationship that they both shared, Lou Costello announced that he would no longer collaborate with Bud Abbott.
This show was written and researched by myself, Mark Hughes, and proofread and edited by Linda Hughes. Now, the pronunciations of all the names and places may be mine, but the long pause after part 2 is all down to Linda. Anyway, the actors in this episode were Mark Hughes, Linda Hughes and Denise Pooler. With special thanks to Neil Packer and the staff at the Haunted Antiques Paranormal Research Centre in Hinckley. And of course, a big thank you to everyone for listening. We never run out of ideas here at the office for Mark's Unexplained World podcast. But if you do know of any other intriguing stories under the Unexplained banner, which include ufology, hauntings, disasters, and any other sort of paranormal phenomena, as well as true crime, unsolved crime, and missing people, just drop me a direct message and I'll see what I can do. I will also include the name of the person who suggested the idea in the end credits of the podcast, if they're happy for me to do so, of course. And again, just to add, if you are listening to this show on YouTube, please give us a review and a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel. And if you are listening on any of the other podcast platforms, again, give us a like and a follow. I thank you in advance. Mark's Unexplained World, because there's more to the paranormal than meets the third eye. And remember, guys, keep it real, because being real is better than being perfect. No AI was used or harmed in the making of this or any other episode of Mark's Unexplained World. This show and all its contents are covered by the basic copyright of Mark the Medium.